Good morning and welcome to my workshop. My name is Darren and today I'd like to talk to you about some of the smaller tools that I have around my workshop that may come in handy around yours. You see, with a tape measure you have these little hooks that are designed to move, so as when you're up against something like a wall for example, it pushes in and this face becomes your reference for measurement. And when you're going over the end of a piece of wood for example, like this piece pulls out, slides out. See? It slides out, and so the inside face becomes your zero reference for measuring. But that introduces a lot of error, especially when these components here start to wear. For example, where it goes through the actual tape itself will stretch and widen with wear after a period of time. And the other thing you get when you're using a tape measure such as this is you're technically eyeballing it every time. You're not using a nice hard piece of plastic like you are on the story stick. You get looking at this and you're going, oh yeah, there's my pencil at, let's say 200 so we're not on the other line. So there's my pencil mark at 200. Each time eyeballing it, there's my pencil mark at 200. And of course you're getting close, very close, but there is slight room for parallax error, I suppose, as you go, which is eliminated with the nice hard plastic edge on the Story Stick. This is the Story Stick Pro from Woodpeckers, and what it allows you to do is make repeatable marks or repeatable layout lines all the same length multiple times without any variation, without any interpretation as to a measurement. So say for example you wanted to go for a half measurement and you're using a tape measure, and so you're eyeballing the gap in the half area just each time. You could be slightly off, there'll be slight variation in your markings as you went. So the idea of the Story Stick Pro is you hook this end over the end of your wood, that becomes your zero reference, so this is your zero reference here, and then that allows you to set this at a specific length. So let's set this, say for example at 230, 220, there we go, there's 220 right there. And so now I can make repeatable marks all the same length. So if I roll this over now, I'll do another one. It's the same, and I can pop this over the other side, hook it on there. If I want to mark from the other side of the wood, works just as well, it carries across. So you can see they've lined up around the corner there, the two marks we've got. Oh, I don't know how easy that's, you can see the pencil line here. You move the light around a bit. Certainly you can see them on the top, no problem. There you go, you can see it continuing around the corner for you. So the scale on the bottom half here starts at this end and runs out in millimeters, but there's also a scale on the top which has a zero center line. So if you wanted to do center out from somewhere, you could set that fella for 0 and then measure outwards either side. So there you go, that's 60 mil out from that end and $60 mil out for that end, for example. So we've got, there's our center, 60 and 60. So it also allows you to do that sort of thing. This might be handy again if you were maybe making shelves and you wanted to lay your lines out evenly from the center to use that as a spacing point of reference. So there you go, very handy for that. Alright, moving on, I have 4 Incra rules. The first one is pretty much just a metal ruler, but as you can see, I'll bring this close, I'll move the light so you can see the light shine through the holes. There you go, you can see the light shining through the holes there. Each one of those holes is perfect for a 0.5mm pencil, so you can make those again repeatable marks over and over again. So we've got millimetre accuracy across here, and then we've got quarter, half and 3/4 of a millimetre offset down the bottom. So that makes it nice and easy to mark these things. Moving on from that, still made by Incra, is the corner. And the idea of this one, again, this corner Incra rule, is you can measure on mark on two faces, like so. Really handy if you want to do around the corner measurement. So let's say you want to have a measurement on two faces, the same distance from the end. We come up, make your mark on that face, make your mark on that face, and the two line up perfectly. So very handy, especially for transferring marks around corners. And the last of my little Incra tools, again, got all the cutouts for the pencil. And again, here we've got the offsets, that quarter, half and 3/4 of a millimetre offset, and of course the millimetre markings themselves. This one's really handy, and this is probably my most used marking tool because it just butts nice up against the edge with this little end stop here, and you make your measurement. And if you've got a line you want to make over a distance, you can just pop your pencil into place and just slide the whole thing, and you get your nice line nicely marked out, ready to go. So that's my measuring tools. I also keep handy, it comes in handy far more often than I would think for woodwork, a digital vernier caliper set. Very handy, and I actually use it more for measuring things like router bits, guide bushings, nuts, bolts and screws than I do for measuring wood. Also, you know, the thickness of hinges and stuff like that when you've got to recess them comes in very handy. Sometimes I use it for measuring the thickness of wood as well, but it's more the peripheral things that it gets used for. But highly recommended to anybody. And being digital, it's a lot quicker and easier to read than trying to read it straight off the scale. Another tool very handy for measuring and marking is simply just this punch awl. All you do with it, nothing exciting, you've probably seen them all before, is you make a little dent in your wood where you're going to drill. And that helps you centre your drill when you go to drill, and stops especially for twist drills, stops them wandering off centre when you do drill. Very handy. You can also use it as a line scribe, but not as accurate for that because it's sharpened to a point, not a blade. But very handy for drilling. Highly recommended. You should get one of those. And last amongst my measuring and marking, little calculator. Very handy thing to have in the workshop. You've got to add, subtract and divide and whatever, various different lengths throughout the day. It's always good to check your maths, especially if you're doing a lot of repetitive calculations. You don't want to make one mistake along the line that'll throw everything out. So a calculator can be very handy. Something I always keep in the workshop. Brad point drill bits. As you can see, you can see on the tip of a brad point drill bit, there's a little point, and that helps it stay on track when you're trying to drill. Especially if you've pre-punched your hole, that little tiny spike will sit right in the punch mark and guide the drill nice and easily straight down through the hole. If you're familiar with the old twist drill bit, which doesn't have the point the same as the brad point drill bit, these have a tendency to skate around when you first start drilling, especially if you haven't pre-drilled the hole. So something well worth having is the old brad point bit. Wooden mallets. Why would you want a wooden mallet? Well, a normal hammer will ruin the back of your chisel, and likewise you might want to knock some pieces of wood together and not want to bruise it or dent the wood. That's where mallets can be really handy. Much softer on the tools, much softer on the wood. I made both of the mallets myself. This one I made out of jarrah. It's just 3 pieces. The centre piece is one with the handle and comes up into the head. That's been cut to shape. And then 2 side pieces stuck on with biscuits, forming the rest of the mallet. Fairly basic one. And this one I turned up out of a single piece of jarrah on the lathe. This one is used more for banging chisels, especially carving chisels. This one's a general all-round bash it thing, and I've had this for more than 10 years now, and it's seen a lot of use. So mallets, well worth having. Alright, moving on slightly, but still on the subject of chisels, little segue there. A chisel and plane sharpening guide. What this does is allows you to set your angles for your chisels and plane blades prior to sharpening them. In the centre here, this one's made by Veritas. You have a selectable angle guide. I've got this one set for 30 degrees, but you can see there's 20 degrees, 35 degrees, 25 degrees and 15. I like 30 degrees for a lot of things. So what you then do is you take your chisel or your plane blade in this little guide here, slot him in place until it sits nicely, and you can actually see if I bring this up, what you're after here. If you look at the head of the blade, see, you want it to have no air gap, you want it to fit right in there, so that's set for the right angle. It's actually quite easy. Put that through there on the guide, push it right in, tighten it up, there you go, and then you take that over to your sharpening stone. Got a wheel on the bottom that runs along the sharpening stone, and away we go. Helps you sharpen a nice consistent angle. There's even a little micro adjust here which you can pull out and offset the wheel a little bit, which then allows you to do a micro bevel that some people like on their chisels and plane blades. Trying to hand sharpen plane blades without some sort of angle guide is particularly difficult. Chisels, they're not the easiest to hand sharpen without any guide, but planes you need to be very accurate with, and having something like that is a definite plus. Again from Veritas, a corner chisel. So let's say, again, sorry to keep going back to hinges, but we use a lot of hinges, us woodworkers. You've routed out your area for your hinge, but there's little rounded corners now. So what you want to do is you want to take your corner chisel and you line it up on the corner where you've got it cut. Get it nice and square. You drop this fella in, like so, and you give him a little tap, and away you go. You've cut the corner of your chisel, corner of your mortise, and squared him up nicely. So, Veritas corner chisel. I do most of my sawing either on the saw table, the miter saw, or over on the MFT3 table, but every now and again there's a cause to do a little bit of hand sawing. Small items, difficult cuts to get a large power tool in, or something that's just going to be over in a few seconds and it's just not worth setting up a power tool. Not a fan of Western style saws, but I do love a good Japanese saw. These saws cut on the pull stroke and have a very, very thin blade, meaning it leaves a very thin kerf or cut mark in the wood. Very handy for things like hand cutting dovetails, trimming off the ends of small items. Any smaller cuts, this is brilliant. For slightly larger cuts, I use this one. It's called a shark saw, pull saw. So technically it is still Japanese, it's made in Japan. But it's not your typical Japanese saw, but definitely of the Japanese style. Again, very thin kerf, 2 pitches of blade, or 2 pitches of blade, that's correct. One fine, one coarse. Obviously the coarse for faster cuts, fine for smaller, more accurate cuts. Again, very thin kerf, nice and easy cuts on the pull cut. And the last little hand saws that I use is this little fella. Big Cherry Plus. Got this at Carbatech in WA. And the idea of this one, it's a flush cut saw. So let's say, for example, you've got something like this fella here. This is a dowel sticking up. It could be something else. You want to cut it off flush with the wood. The idea is you just pop it over. Now I like to pop a little bit of cardboard or something in between first, so the saw's not running straight on the wood, so it doesn't mar the surface. And that leaves you ever so slightly proud, and then you cut off the rest, or sand off the rest later. But here you go, you just get this fella, there you go, and you've got a nice flush cut with the surface. Very handy, comes in useful all the time. I probably use it almost every project. Something I only bought this year, and wish I'd bought a lot sooner, were these rubber mats to stand on while you're working for extended periods of time. Being a soft material that feels somewhat like neoprene coated in rubber, they absorb a lot of the shock, so when you're standing or working for long periods of time in one spot, your knees and ankles don't get fatigued as quick. Okay, well that brings us to the end. Thanks for watching, I hope it's been of some use, and I'll see you next time. Catch you later.